Hey everyone, thanks for tuning in. If you're new here, consider subscribing. It really helps keep these stories coming. And while you're here, let me know in the comments where you're listening from. Now, sit back, relax, and let's get into the story. The first thing I noticed was the smell. Not the river. Chicago's river has its own stubborn mix of algae, diesel, and old stone that you get used to if you live near it long enough. This was different. It was the metallic tang of wet concrete and iron, the chemical bite of treated water, and something else. Something like overheated electrical insulation that had been warmed too long. I stood on the riverwalk near a plain-looking utility door set into a concrete retaining wall just inland from the South Branch. People walked past me with their heads down like it was any other afternoon. A few were filming the distant smoke plume with their phones as if it was a street performance. 2 blocks away, sirens were still going, but they were ragged now. Not the clean rise and fall of a normal emergency response. They were stretched thin, overlapped, and sometimes cut off mid-wail like a throat clearing in fear. I pulled my hood up and kept my hands in my pockets. I tried to look like a guy killing time, not like someone waiting for the moment a city forgets to keep an eye on a single maintenance hatch. My name is Daniel Rains, 34. I'm a field inspector for a civil engineering subcontractor that does work around stormwater assets, outfalls, gate structures, culverts, pump stations, the ugly bones of the place that keep the streets from turning into canals when the weather shifts. Most of what I do is paperwork and photographs. Sometimes, if a client wants eyes on something quickly, I go out and check it myself. That job had taught me 2 important truths. 1. Chicago is held together by systems almost nobody thinks about until they fail. 2. Those systems have access points. Lots of them. All morning, the news had been calling it civil unrest tied to a fast-moving illness. They used the soft words at first. Agitation. Erratic behavior. Clusters. The anchor looked like she was trying not to swallow. By noon, the soft words were cracking. On my phone, the alert banners stacked on top of each other. Shelter guidance. Boil water notice for certain neighborhoods. A transit disruption. Then the one that made my stomach go cold. Emergency. Avoid contact with symptomatic individuals. Do not attempt to restrain. Keep distance. Call 911. Do not attempt to restrain. That wasn't a riot statement. That was a human statement. I'd spent the last 2 hours trying to execute a normal plan. Get out of the loop, get to my apartment in Pilsen, grab my go bag, my documents, cash, my work truck, and head for my sister's place in Indiana. It was a simple route in a normal city. But the city wasn't normal anymore. At Roosevelt, a crowd had flooded the street around a stopped bus. A man had climbed onto the roof, waving his arms like he was conducting an orchestra made of panic. People were screaming for the doors to open. Inside the bus, faces pressed the glass, fearful, sweaty, and not all of them right. On the opposite sidewalk, a woman with a torn sleeve stumbled into a parking meter and kept bumping it. Again and again, like she couldn't understand why the world had become solid. Everyone kept saying infected, but nobody wanted to say what it looked like. I had seen enough video snippets in the last hour to know the infected weren't movie monsters. They were people running hot with something that stripped the brakes out of their minds. Some were violent, some were frantic. Some were simply gone, walking until they hit something and then walking into it again. It wasn't about blood or bites or horror story rules. It was about a city of 3 million people losing the simple agreement that strangers won't suddenly sprint at you screaming. And if that agreement breaks, you stop being a citizen and become a body trying to stay unbroken. I turned away from the Roosevelt chaos and cut back toward the river, because I knew something most people didn't. Under Chicago, there are places built to hold water when the city can't. There's a network, huge, deep, and mostly invisible, meant to take the surge when storms hit hard and the river wants to climb out of its channel. The big system people call the deep tunnel isn't just a sewer. It's a set of massive storage tunnels and shafts that can swallow floodwater and keep streets from becoming rivers. It has gates and drop shafts and maintenance access points. It has ventilation systems and power feeds. It has a logic to it. Hold the surge, manage the flow, protect the city above. If the city above was collapsing, those tunnels wouldn't fix society, but they might give me time to watch, time to breathe, time to decide whether to run or wait. Time is the only currency that matters when everything else starts to fail. I had worked a site last summer where a contractor had been replacing a hatch frame near a levee-like retaining wall. It wasn't labeled for the public. It was just a flush metal plate with a bolt pattern and a small rectangular utility tag that said, in tiny letters, MWRD, Metropolitan Water Reclamation District. Most people would step over it without noticing. I had noticed. I had taken photos. I had read the work order. I had asked questions. Not because I was paranoid, but because I'm an engineer by temperament, even if I'm not the one stamping drawings. I need to know how things connect. The hatch led to a maintenance corridor that connected to a flood control tunnel segment. Not one of the deepest main tunnels, but a substantial conduit meant to relieve pressure and route water during heavy surge. It had a fan house up the way, and it tied into a control structure near a pumping station. It was not meant to be lived in, but it was meant to exist when everything else was wet, loud, and dangerous. When I got there, the Riverwalk was still open. A city employee in a neon vest was half-heartedly trying to direct pedestrians away from the water's edge. He looked exhausted and scared. He looked like he'd been given instructions that didn't match reality. I waited until a group of tourists wandered past. Then I stepped close to the hatch and knelt like I was tying my shoe. My fingers slid under the edge. The hatch had a recessed handle and a lock bolt. The lock wasn't a padlock. It was a tamper-resistant bolt head. But I wasn't helpless. My work bag had a small set of tools I kept for site checks. A compact multi-bit driver, a pair of work gloves, a headlamp, and a foldable hex key set. Normally it was for opening panels, checking tags, tightening something that was rattling so it didn't become a claim later. Today, it was my ticket into the underside. I positioned my body to block the view. The river was to my left. The pedestrians were behind me. I worked the bolt with slow, careful motions, keeping my shoulders relaxed so I wouldn't look like I was doing something forbidden. When the bolt loosened, I felt the hatch shift. A breath of cold air rose from the seam. The smell was stronger now, wet mineral, old concrete, and the faint odor of stagnant flow. I took one more look around. Above, a helicopter thumped across the skyline, low enough to rattle the street signs. Farther west, smoke climbed in a dirty column. Someone screamed somewhere that wasn't close enough to locate. That was my last normal moment for a while. I lifted the hatch. The opening was a rectangle of darkness. A ladder went down, rungs glistening with condensation. I dropped in, pulled the hatch down behind me, and for the first time that day, the noise of the city faded like someone turned a dial. It wasn't silence. It was the deep, heavy quiet of a place built to be out of sight. You could still hear vibration, traffic overhead, distant impacts, maybe even gunfire muffled into something like thunder. But it wasn't sharp. It didn't hook my nerves the same way. My headlamp cut a cone through the dark. The beam hit concrete walls stained with old water lines and mineral trails. A small landing, then another ladder, then a corridor that sloped gently down. I took a breath, and it tasted like damp stone. Confined spaces are dangerous. Everyone who has worked around them knows that. Air can be bad, oxygen can be low, gases can collect. You can become a headline. I wasn't going in blind. In my bag, I had a personal gas monitor, an older unit my company had retired from official use but still functional. It measured oxygen percentage and flagged certain hazardous gases. I clipped it on and waited for it to cycle. The screen stabilized. Oxygen was normal. No alarm. I exhaled a shaky laugh that sounded too loud in the corridor. "Okay," I whispered to nobody. "Okay." Then I walked. The corridor widened into a maintenance tunnel that felt like the inside of a giant concrete throat. A shallow channel ran along one side, carrying a thin stream of water that made a constant trickle sound. The floor was damp, with grit and tiny pebbles dragged in by boots and flow over the years. Every 20 yards or so, there were wall-mounted fixtures, conduit runs, junction boxes, occasional signage with numbers and arrows. The paint was worn. The language was industrial and plain. This wasn't a secret bunker. It was infrastructure. I followed the slope until I came to a steel door on the right. A bulkhead-style door with a wheel handle and a placard that read, "Authorized personnel only." I put my hand on the wheel and paused. I was not authorized in the strict sense, but the city had stopped being strict about anything that mattered. I turned the wheel. The door groaned like it resented being used. Beyond it, the tunnel opened into something bigger. My headlamp beam vanished into distance and came back off water. A flood control tunnel. It was enormous, wide enough that 2 trucks could have driven side by side if the floor were dry, and high enough that my light barely reached the crown of the arched ceiling. The surface underfoot was a service walkway along the side, slightly elevated. The center was a channel designed to carry water when needed, currently holding a slow-moving, shallow flow that reflected my light in a wavering stripe. The air was cooler here, moving slightly. I could feel it on my face like a faint breath. Far down the tunnel, a ventilation fan hummed, steady, mechanical, comforting in the way a heartbeat is comforting when you've been running. I stood there and listened. Above me was Chicago. Glass towers, brick apartments, train lines, people, panic. Around me was a system built for pressure. I felt something inside me ease, just a fraction. Then I heard it. A sound from the direction I'd come. Not the drip of water, not the hum of the fan. Footsteps. Fast, uneven footsteps on a wet floor. I snapped my light toward the bulkhead door. The corridor beyond was still dark, but the footsteps were closer. I backed away, heart punching at my ribs. Someone came through the doorway, and my beam caught them full in the chest. A woman. Late 20s maybe, dark hair pulled back. A backpack. A high-visibility vest over a hoodie like she grabbed it from a job site. Her face was streaked with sweat and grime. Her eyes were wide but focused in a way that meant she was still in there. "Don't," she said, raising a hand as if my light could hurt her. "Please, don't close that." I stared at her, trying to decide if she was infected. Her breathing was fast, but not ragged. She wasn't twitching. She wasn't staring past me. She wasn't trying to run at me. "I'm not," she said quickly, as if she'd read my thoughts. "I'm not sick. I followed you." My throat went dry. "You saw me?" "I saw the hatch," she said. "I work near here. I saw you open it and go down. I didn't know what else to do." Her voice cracked on the last word. Behind her, somewhere in the corridor, there was a dull impact sound, like someone hitting a wall. Once, then again. She flinched and looked back. "Please," she said again. "I can help. I'm not dead weight." I kept my hand near my bag, where the only weapon I had was a heavy flashlight and a small pry bar used for utility covers. I didn't want to fight her. I didn't want to fight anyone. But I also didn't want to die because I let the wrong person follow me into my last safe place. "What's your name?" I asked. "Maya," she said. "Maya Velasquez." I'm an electrician apprentice with a contractor that does maintenance on fan houses and pump controls. We were on a job this morning. Then everything went like that." She gestured upward, as if the chaos had a direction. Another impact sounded behind her, closer. A faint, desperate voice echoed down the corridor. It might have been someone calling. It might have been someone wailing. Maya's eyes locked onto mine. "If you leave me out there," she said, "I'm going to die." I hated that she was right. I also hated that letting her in might get me killed anyway. I stepped aside. "Get in," I said, "now." She moved fast, boots slipping slightly on the damp surface. She crossed the threshold and I swung the bulkhead door shut. The wheel handle spun under my hands. I locked it down hard. The impacts hit the other side almost immediately. A body, someone, threw themselves against the steel door. Once, twice, again. The sound was muffled but heavy. Maya pressed her forehead to the cold metal, eyes closed. "Thank you," she whispered. I didn't answer. My focus narrowed to the wheel handle and the way the door shivered under each hit. Then, as abruptly as it started, the impacts stopped. There was a pause, long enough that my skin prickled. Then footsteps retreated, splashing away down the corridor. Silence returned. Maya slid down the door until she was sitting on the damp floor, knees pulled up. I realized my hands were shaking. I forced them still and turned my headlamp beam away from her face so it wouldn't blind her. "You okay?" I asked, though it felt like a ridiculous question. She let out a breath that was half laugh, half sob. "No," she said, "but I'm alive." I nodded. "Daniel," I said. "Daniel Rains." She looked at me like she was trying to file my name away as proof that she hadn't become the last person on Earth. "Okay," she said. "Daniel." We stood there for a moment in the dim light, listening to the tunnel's hum. Then reality reasserted itself in practical terms. We had water below us, concrete all around, a fan somewhere down the line, a door between us and whatever had come running after her. And we had no idea what was happening to the city above except that it was happening fast. I walked farther into the tunnel, scanning with my light. The service walkway ran along the wall with a guardrail. Every so often there were recessed alcoves with equipment. Valve wheels, pipe manifolds, electrical cabinets bolted to the concrete. There were emergency phones with faded instructions. There were metal ladders leading up to smaller maintenance shafts that disappeared into darkness above. Most of those ladders would lead to locked hatches, street-level grates, or secure fan house structures. Some might lead to exits. Some might lead to death. "We need a plan," I said out loud, because saying it made it feel real. Maya pushed herself up, wiping her face with the sleeve of her hoodie. "First plan," she said, voice steadier now. "Air, power, water, and not getting drowned if the city decides to dump a storm into this thing." I looked at her, surprised. She shrugged. "Electricians and engineers are basically the same kind of anxious," she said. "We just obsess over different parts." That earned a small involuntary smile from me, the first of the day. "Okay," I said. "Air?" I tapped my gas monitor and showed her the oxygen reading. "It's good right now," I said. "Fan's running." "Fan running means power," she said. "Power means someone hasn't lost the grid completely, or the fan house has backup. Backup like a generator." "Usually," she said. "Could be a dedicated feed, depends on the facility." She pointed down the tunnel. "If there's a fan house, there's a control panel somewhere. I can check it. I can tell you if it's on utility power or backup." "Water," I said, nodding. I crouched and dipped my fingers in the shallow flow in the channel, cold, cloudy, not drinkable without treatment. I had a metal water bottle in my bag, half full from earlier. I had a couple of emergency purification tablets I kept for field days in remote areas. It wasn't much. Maya rummaged in her backpack and pulled out a small plastic bottle of sports drink, an energy bar, and a compact first aid kit. "We're not stocked," she said, "but we're not empty." My brain started doing what it always does: inventory, evaluate, prioritize. Shelter, yes, for now. Visibility low. Threats, infected above, possible infected in connected corridors, rising water, loss of ventilation, loss of light, other survivors. "We should pick a base spot," I said. "Somewhere not right next to the door. If something gets through, we want distance and warning." Maya nodded. "And we need to be quiet," she said. "Sound carries." She was right. Even my breathing felt loud in the huge tunnel. We walked down the service path, light beams sweeping. About a quarter-mile in, we found an equipment alcove with a slightly wider platform, a steel cabinet, and a wall ladder that went up into a smaller shaft. Above the ladder was a sign with a number and a code. It was faded but readable. Maya stared at it. "That's a vent access," she said. "Or a cable chase. Could lead to a fan house or an intermediate room." "Could be an exit," I said. "Could also be locked solid," she replied. We chose that alcove anyway. The platform was raised enough that if the channel rose a bit, we wouldn't be in the first inch of water. There was a cabinet that could offer some concealment, and the ladder gave us a vertical option. I sat down with my back against the concrete wall. The cold seeped through my jacket almost immediately. Maya sat across from me, legs folded, hands busy opening her first aid kit like she needed something to do. Up above, muffled through layers of earth and concrete, came a distant roar, like a crowd or a long line of traffic or a stadium losing its mind. Then it faded, leaving only the steady hum of the fan. For the first time, I allowed myself to think I might be stuck down here. The idea should have been terrifying. Instead, it felt like relief, like stepping into a storm drain while hail shreds the street. Maya broke the silence. "What did you see?" she asked softly. "Up there." I pictured the bus, the woman bumping the parking meter, the crowd's hungry panic. "I saw people forget how to be people," I said. She nodded slowly, like that matched what she'd seen too. "I was at a fan house near the river," she said. "We were doing a panel check. We heard shouting outside, then the building next door. Someone came out running and just slammed into our gate, face first. Didn't even try to stop, like their brain didn't know what pain was." She swallowed. "My supervisor, Frank, he went to help. He was a big guy, strong. He grabbed the runner's shoulders." Maya's hands tightened around the first aid kit. "And the runner turned and tried to bite him," she said, voice trembling. "Not like a drunk person, like an animal, like it was the only idea left." I didn't ask what happened to Frank. I didn't need the details. Her face told me enough. Chaos, separation, escape. "We can't stay forever," I said after a moment. "We'll need supplies." Maya exhaled and nodded. "Yeah," she said. "We'll need a way out that isn't that hatch, because if the infected learn that door is here, they'll wait," I finished, "or someone else will." She pointed at my bag. "What do you have?" she asked. I laid it out. Headlamp with spare batteries, handheld flashlight, gloves, multi-tool, compact pry bar, a roll of electrical tape, zip ties, a small first aid pouch, 2 protein bars, the half-full water bottle, a lighter, a notepad, a pencil, and the gas monitor. Not a survivalist kit, a work bag plus a few habits. Maya showed me hers, her own headlamp, a spare phone battery pack, a basic multimeter, a compact adjustable wrench, insulated screwdrivers, a few wire connectors, and a small roll of duct tape. Not exactly camping gear, she said. But you can make electricity behave, I said. She gave me a grim half-smile. I can try, she said, if there's anything left to behave. That night, though night was just a concept underground, we settled into the alcove as if we were two animals hiding in a storm sewer. We turned our lights down to the lowest setting. We spoke in whispers. We ate 1 bar each and sipped water like it was expensive. I tried my phone again. No service. Maya's phone, the same. But my phone still had battery, and it still held cached news notifications from earlier. I scrolled through them, reading headlines like they were the last postcards from civilization. Hospitals overwhelmed. Transit suspended on multiple lines. Authorities urge calm. Reports of violent incidents across multiple neighborhoods. Then the last one, time-stamped not long before I went underground. National Guard mobilized. Stay indoors. Avoid riverfront areas. Avoid riverfront areas. I looked at the tunnel's wet concrete and felt a bitter laugh rise in my throat. We had done the opposite. But we were alive. Hours passed in a strange rhythm. Dozing, waking at distant noises, checking the gas monitor, listening for the door. At some point, the hum of the fan changed pitch as if the load shifted. Maya sat up instantly. "Did you hear that?" she whispered. "Yeah," I said. She crawled toward the tunnel wall, pressing her ear to the concrete like she could hear through it. "It's still on," she said. But that sounded like it switched feeds. Or a motor controller changed state. "You can check?" She nodded slowly. "Tomorrow," she said. "We should scout toward the fan house. If we can find a control room, we might find water. Maybe even an emergency supply cabinet. Some sites keep jugs." And that was how our first real plan formed. Not as a heroic mission, but as a practical crawl toward anything useful. We slept in shifts without formally agreeing to it because neither of us trusted the world enough to let both of us be unconscious. When I woke again, my watch said 6:12 a.m., but the tunnel looked exactly the same. I tried to imagine sunrise over the river, light spilling between buildings. Instead, my world was headlamp beams and water reflections. Maya and I ate the last of the energy bar and drank the last of the sports drink. Then we packed up and moved. We walked down the tunnel in the direction of the fan hum, keeping our steps slow to avoid splashing. The deeper we went, the more we found evidence of maintenance. Cable trays running overhead, thick conduits bolted to the wall, occasional wall-mounted lights that were off but intact. "Those should be on," Maya murmured, pointing. "If the tunnel system is in normal operation, service lights usually run. Either we're in a section that's normally dark or power's partially down." My stomach tightened. Partially down could become fully down without warning. After another 10 minutes, the tunnel curved slightly, and a shadowed structure appeared ahead. An opening on the right with a steel platform and a heavy door, this one marked more clearly. Ventilation access, high voltage. Maya's eyes narrowed in focus like a mechanic seeing an engine. "That's it," she whispered. We approached carefully. The door had a keypad but also a mechanical override lock. It wasn't meant to keep out determined professionals. It was meant to keep out curious civilians. I used the pry bar gently to test the frame. No give. Maya tried the handle. Locked. She leaned close to the keypad and tapped it with a fingernail. "Dead," she said. "No lights." "Can you bypass?" I asked. She shot me a look. "Not like in movies," she whispered. "And I'm not going to short random things in a flood tunnel, but there might be an emergency key box somewhere, or a manual release from inside if the site crew left it." She scanned around the platform. There was a small metal box mounted to the wall, the kind used for keys, sealed with a simple latch. Maya pulled out her adjustable wrench and worked at the latch, carefully, quietly. It popped open. Inside was a key ring with 2 keys and a laminated tag. Maya read the tag with her lips moving. "Vent house access," she whispered. She looked at me, and for the first time since we met, something like hope flickered in her eyes. We used the key. The door opened with a hiss of stale air. Inside was a stairwell going up. Concrete steps, damp but solid. The air smelled less like the tunnel and more like an enclosed building. Dust, old paint, electrical panels. We climbed, lights angled down so we wouldn't shine up through any grates to the surface. At the top was another door, this one with a simple push bar. Maya paused, hand on the bar. "Listen," she mouthed. We both listened. Above us, nothing obvious, no footsteps, no voices, no banging. Just the faint, distant vibration of a city that was still moving. Somewhere. Maya pushed the bar. The door swung open into a small control room. And the lights were on. Not bright overhead lights, but the glow of control panels, indicator lamps, and a small monitor screen mounted to the wall. It was like stepping into a cockpit after crawling through a cave. Maya moved quickly, scanning the panels without touching anything yet. "Okay," she whispered. "We've got power here, panels energized. That monitor looks like a basic system status." She leaned closer and read. "Vent fan 1, running. Vent fan 2, standby. Supply feed, utility, backup, ready." I let out a breath I didn't realize I was holding. "So, the grid is still up," I said. "Some of it," she replied, "could be isolated, could be running on a substation that hasn't gone down. But for now, yes." On a shelf in the corner, there were cases of bottled water. Not many, but enough for a crew. Probably for heat days and long maintenance shifts. Next to it, a metal cabinet labeled First Aid. Maya looked at me as if asking permission. I nodded. We took what we could without being reckless. 4 bottles of water, a couple of packaged snacks from a small emergency stash box, and a roll of gauze from the cabinet. Then Maya opened a lower cabinet near the panels and pulled out something that made her eyebrows lift. A handheld radio. Not a civilian walkie-talkie. A proper site radio likely used to coordinate with crews in the tunnel and at the surface. She turned it on. Static filled the room, then a voice, faint, clipped, exhausted. "Repeat, do not attempt to move north on the expressway. Road is blocked. Multiple incidents. If you are sheltering, stay sheltering. If you are in a secure facility, lock down. This is not a drill." Maya and I stared at each other. A secure facility. That could be us. She adjusted the volume down and scanned the radio's label. "Channel plan," she whispered. "This is probably a city or contractor frequency. Might pick up emergency traffic." I looked at the control room door. "We need to be careful," I said. "If anyone else finds this place, they'll come here for the same reason we did." Maya nodded. "But this gives us options," she said, voice firm now. "We can monitor, we can charge our phones, we can keep the fan running if the grid drops by switching to backup, if I can access the transfer controls." I stared at the panel with its neat labels and realized something. This tunnel wasn't just a hole. It was part of a living system, still humming, still trying to do its job while the people above fell apart. And if we were smart, we could ride that humming system like a raft in a flood. We spent the next hour doing careful work. Maya checked the panel readings, making sure nothing was overheating. She located a manual switch for the standby fan and tested it briefly, then returned it to standby. She found a maintenance log and flipped through it, looking for anything recent. The last entry was 3 days ago. Normal inspection, normal readings. Normal right up until the city stopped being normal. We charged our phones using a wall outlet and a spare cord Maya found in a drawer. We filled our bottles. We ate small bites and tried not to devour everything at once. Then, as if the tunnel system wanted to remind us who was really in charge, the radio crackled with a new transmission. Units responding to incident near Riverwalk access. Multiple individuals reported entering maintenance hatch. Repeat. Report of individuals entering. Maya froze. My stomach dropped. They were talking about us. Is that? Maya whispered. Yeah, I said. Someone saw. The transmission continued, but the voice was strained. No available units. All units committed. Advise any nearby personnel to secure access points. Maya turned the radio down until it was barely audible. They know people went in, she said, but they can't respond. So, no one's coming to drag us out, I said. Not today, she replied. We looked at each other, and a new kind of fear settled between us. Not the fear of immediate attack, but the fear of being forgotten. That's when I understood the tunnel's real danger. Not infection, not riots, not even water. It was time. You could hide in a place like this and survive the first wave. But you could also slowly become part of the infrastructure, another forgotten element in the system, living on scraps and stale air while the world above rewrote itself without you. We need rules, Maya said, reading my face. Like, real rules. I nodded. Rule 1, I said, we don't go out unless we have to. Rule 2, she said. We don't open that bulkhead door for anyone we haven't verified. Rule 3, I added. We track water levels. If there's a storm, this tunnel becomes a death trap. Maya pointed at the control monitor. We can, she said. If this status screen ties to level sensors, we can watch it. And there should be rainfall alerts maybe, or at least pump status. I glanced at the monitor again and felt a grim appreciation for the engineers who designed redundancy into everything. You said you were at a fan house when it started, I said. Do you know this system well? Enough, she replied. Not everything, but I understand the logic. And you, she pointed at my gas monitor, you understand confined space. Between us, we've got a chance. A chance at what? I asked quietly. Maya's face hardened. At outlasting the first collapse, she said. At least. We didn't stay in the control room full time. It was too obvious, too valuable. If someone came down into the tunnel system looking for help, they'd follow the hum and find the lights. Instead, we treated it like a supply node. We returned to our alcove base, carrying water and the radio, and we left the control room door locked behind us. The tunnel was our home now. The control room was our lifeline. That day, we heard movement overhead. Heavy footfalls, occasional thuds, a distant scream that echoed down a maintenance shaft like a warning. Once, we heard something that sounded like metal being dragged across concrete far above, and both of us sat frozen, lights off, breathing shallow until the sound faded. The infected weren't always loud, but people were. People screamed, people shouted, people begged. The infected, sometimes they simply moved. That night, the radio traffic changed. The voices sounded fewer. The gaps between transmissions stretched longer. And in the late hours, when my watch said 11:48 p.m., Maya and I heard something that made us both sit upright. A steady pounding. Not on our bulkhead door. Somewhere above, on a maintenance hatch. A pattern. 3 hits, pause, 2 hits, pause, 3 hits again. A signal. Maya looked at me with wide eyes. That's not random, she whispered. That's someone trying to communicate. Or someone trying to get in, I whispered back. The pounding repeated. 3, 2, 3. Then a muffled voice, distant but human. "Hello," it called. "Is anyone down there? Hello?" Maya's hands tightened on the radio. I felt my heart slam in my chest because the voice wasn't infected. It was a person. A real person. And the choice in front of us was brutal in its simplicity. If we answered, we might be letting in someone who would help us. Someone who might bring skills, supplies, information. Or we might be letting in the thing that kills us if they were bitten, if they were followed, if they were desperate enough to become dangerous. Maya's lips barely moved. "What do we do?" she mouthed. I stared into the darkness of the tunnel and listened to the pounding echo like a heartbeat in a concrete vein. In that moment, I realized the tunnel wasn't just a shelter. It was a test, not of strength, but of judgment. And above us, Chicago kept falling, faster than the river ever could. I didn't answer the voice right away. Neither did Maya. We sat in the alcove with our lights off, the radio volume turned down until it was just a whisper of static. The pounding above repeated once more. 3 hits, 2 hits, 3 hits, and then stopped. The silence afterward was worse than the noise. It felt intentional, like whoever was up there was listening for us to betray ourselves. "Could be a trap," Maya mouthed. "Could be a person who figured out the hatch," I mouthed back. She shook her head slowly. "Even if they're clean," she whispered, barely audible. "They don't know how this system works. They could open something they shouldn't. Let water in, let others in." She was right. Flood control tunnels aren't basements. They're designed to move massive volumes of water on short notice. A single wrong valve, a single forced gate during a surge, could turn the entire place into a concrete coffin. The voice called again, weaker this time. "Please, I heard the fan. I know someone's down there." That detail tightened something in my chest. The fan hum wasn't obvious unless you were listening for it. Whoever this was had been calm enough, aware enough to notice. Still, calm people could panic later. I leaned close to Maya. "If we answer," I whispered, "we do it on our terms." She hesitated, then nodded once. I moved slowly, deliberately, until I was close enough to the bulkhead door to speak without raising my voice. "Stay where you are," I said, projecting just enough to carry. "Do not touch the hatch. If you're hurt, say so." There was a pause, then a relieved exhale. "I'm not hurt," the voice said. Male, young, breathing hard but controlled. "I'm alone. I work nearby. I saw you go in earlier. I waited. Waited. That mattered too." "What's your name?" I asked. "Ethan," he said. "Ethan Cole. Was a grad student. Environmental science. I was working in a lab near the river." Maya closed her eyes for a second, thinking. "Any injuries?" she called. "Any bites? Be honest." "No," Ethan said quickly. "I swear, I haven't touched anyone. I ran when things went bad." I looked back at Maya. She didn't answer right away. Finally, she whispered, "We verify." I nodded. "Ethan," I said, "you're going to back away from the hatch, 3 full steps. Then you're going to lift your shirt sleeves and pant legs and turn in a slow circle. You do exactly what I say." There was hesitation, then the scrape of shoes on concrete above. "Okay," Ethan said, voice shaking. "Okay, I'm backing up." We listened. The distance sounded right. "Now," I said. He complied. I could hear fabric moving, shoes pivoting, a faint nervous laugh that had no humor in it. "I'm clean," he said. "I promise." I leaned back from the door. Maya stared at me, jaw tight. "If we bring him in," she whispered, "we can't undo it." "I know," I whispered back. The pounding hadn't resumed, no other footsteps, no distant shrieks. This wasn't a mob at the door. This was one person who had noticed the same thing I had noticed, that the city's underside might outlast the surface. I made the call. "Ethan," I said, "you come down slow. Hands visible. If you run, if you touch anything without being told, we lock the door and you're on your own." "I understand," he said immediately. "I understand." We opened the bulkhead door just enough to let him slip through. He moved carefully, like someone who understood that one wrong move could end everything. He was thin, early 20s, wearing a soaked backpack and a jacket with the university logo half torn off. His eyes darted everywhere, cataloging the tunnel with academic curiosity and animal fear at the same time. When the door was sealed again and the wheel locked, he sagged against the wall and slid down until he was sitting on the concrete. "Thank you," he said, breathless. "Thank you." "Don't thank us yet," Maya said. "You're on probation." Ethan nodded like that made perfect sense. "I get it," he said. "I would have done the same." We didn't move him to the alcove immediately. First came checks, visual inspection, questions, timeline, what he'd seen, where he'd been. He answered everything without argument, sometimes rambling when the adrenaline caught up with him. He had been in a riverfront lab building when alarms went off. Lockdown messages, conflicting instructions, then screaming in the hallway. He'd barricaded a door with a rolling chair and watched, shaking, as someone on the other side slammed into it again and again until the chair bent. When the impact stopped, he didn't wait to see why. He ran. He'd spent hours moving through alleys and service roads, staying low, avoiding crowds. He'd seen infected attack people who tried to help. He'd seen police retreat instead of advance. He'd seen a fire engine abandoned in the middle of an intersection with its lights still on. Nobody inside. "And then I heard the fan," he said quietly. It sounded steady, like something still working. That sentence stayed with me. We brought Ethan to the alcove and set the rules again, clearly this time. Quiet, lights low, no opening doors, no independent exploration. He agreed to all of it without hesitation. That made 3 of us. And that changed everything. 3 people meant more eyes, more ideas, and more risk. It also meant we could do things we couldn't do alone, like rotating watches properly or planning controlled surface trips instead of desperate dashes. The radio became our window to the city. Over the next day, we listened as the tone shifted from overwhelmed to fractured. Dispatchers sounded hoarse. Units stopped checking in. Instructions became vague. Avoid contact, shelter in place, use your judgment. At one point, a voice came over the channel that didn't sound official at all. "If anyone can hear this," the voice said, shaky and untrained. "We're set up in the high school gym on the west side. We have water. We have lights. We need—" The transmission cut off in a burst of static. Maya turned the volume down slowly. "That's how it ends," she said. "People broadcast their location." Ethan swallowed hard. "You think the infected listen?" he asked. "No," I said. "But people do, and not all people are better." By the 3rd day underground, judging by my watch and the rhythm of exhaustion, we faced our first real environmental threat. Rain. We didn't see it, obviously, we heard it. At first, it was just a change in sound, a distant hiss that filtered down through the shafts. Then the channel water level crept up, barely noticeable unless you were watching closely. My engineer's brain did the math immediately. Heavy rainfall upstream could turn this tunnel from refuge to conduit in minutes. Maya and I went to the control room together, leaving Ethan to listen at the alcove. The monitor showed rising inflow rates. Not catastrophic yet, but trending upward. "Storm cell parked over the north side," Maya muttered, reading the data. "If this keeps up—" "We relocate," I said, "higher ground." She nodded. "There's a cross passage with an elevated maintenance deck about a third of a mile back," she said. "Dry under most conditions." We moved deliberately, carrying water and supplies, keeping our lights trained low. The water in the channel rose to ankle depth, then calf depth, flowing faster now, carrying debris, plastic bottles, leaves, a child's shoe. That shoe hit me harder than anything else so far. The elevated deck was real, solid, dry. We climbed and settled in as the tunnel below filled with the sound of moving water. The fan labored but held. The gas monitor stayed quiet. We waited out the storm in the dark, listening to the infrastructure do exactly what it had been designed to do. When the water receded hours later, leaving slick residue on the concrete and a sharper smell in the air, I felt a strange gratitude toward anonymous engineers who had never imagined their work would become someone's last shelter. Days blurred together. We established routines. One person always awake, radio checks at set intervals, water rationing, careful notes in my notepad. Time, observations, changes in sound, changes in air. Ethan proved his worth quickly. He understood systems, not just academically but in how they interconnected. He helped us map possible exit points using old mental layouts of the riverfront buildings. He remembered which structures had basements, which had service corridors, which had secure loading docks. "Not all exits are equal," he said one night, voice low. "Some are choke points. Some are death traps." We chose one. A maintenance shaft that led to the basement of an old municipal storage building. Thick walls, few windows, elevated from the riverwalk by a service yard. If the surface was ever going to be survivable, that place had a chance. Our first surface run was planned like an operation, not an adventure. We waited until the radio traffic thinned, until the city sounded exhausted instead of frantic. Maya checked the fan system one last time and confirmed backup readiness. I packed only essentials. Ethan memorized our route. When we opened the shaft ladder and climbed, my heart hammered so hard I thought it would echo. The basement smelled like mold and old paper. No lights, no movement. We listened for a full minute before pushing the door open. Chicago above was quieter than I remembered. Not peaceful, just emptied. Cars sat where they'd been abandoned. Doors open. Traffic lights blinked uselessly over empty intersections. Somewhere far away, something crashed, followed by a long distant howl that made the hair on my arms stand up. We didn't linger. We grabbed what we could. Canned food from a broken vending area, bottled water from a storage cage, a box of disposable masks, gloves, and a small crowbar that felt suddenly very heavy in my hands. On the way back, we saw them. Not a horde, just two infected moving down the street, slow and erratic, bumping into parked cars. Their clothes were torn, their movements jerky, but there was no mistaking what they were anymore. People whose systems had failed. We slipped back underground without being seen. When the hatch closed and the tunnel's cool air wrapped around us again, none of us spoke for a long time. The city had fallen. Not in an explosion. Not in a single night. It had collapsed the way structures do when too many supports fail at once. Quietly, unevenly, and without ceremony. Weeks passed. The tunnel became our home in ways I hadn't thought possible. We marked time by maintenance cycles, by water levels, by how often the fan needed attention. We talked about what we'd do if things stabilized and what we'd do if they didn't. We didn't pretend this was permanent, but we also didn't rush to leave. The tunnel had become something rare in a broken world. Predictable. Above us, Chicago changed. Fires burned out. New ones flared. The radio sometimes carried organized voices again, small pockets of authority trying to stitch order together with limited reach. Sometimes it carried nothing at all. One evening, as we sat on the elevated deck listening to the fan hum and the distant, muffled city, Ethan said something that stuck with me. "Everyone thinks survival is about weapons," he said quietly, "or strength, or luck." Maya nodded. "But it's really about systems," she said, "and knowing when to trust them." I looked at the concrete walls, the water channel, the humming machinery that still did its job even when people stopped doing theirs. "I sealed myself inside a flood control tunnel when the city fell," I said. "I thought it was an escape." I shook my head slowly. "It wasn't," I said. "It was a pause." And sometimes a pause is the only thing standing between collapse and whatever comes next. Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like and subscribe. Your support keeps these creepypastas coming. Until next time, stay alert, stay safe, and never ignore the feeling that something is watching.